afternoon. I'm Duarte Rodrigues, and I am very honored with this invitation. I would love to be there with you in your marvelous country, Hungary, that I would love to visit in that marvelous palace. When I was invited, I immediately thought, when I saw the picture of your palace, I immediately thought that it would be a good idea to revisit the Palace of Queluz, as it seems that both palaces belong to the same family of Baroque gardens. So I would love to be there and discuss these topics with you. However, as it is not possible due to pandemics, I hope that this has a follow-up, and so that you can send me questions and suggestions through email. I would love to continue the discussion with you, even if not in presence. The Royal Villa of Queluz, arts and expertise for court entertainment or power show. To answer these questions, we are also going to address two polemic issues. So the style and the model of Queluz. If the style is Baroque or Rococo, and the model if it is the Palace and Gardens of Versailles or not. In order to answer these questions, I will analyze 5 topics: the plan, the theoretical and empirical expertise, if we can talk about iconography or iconology, the vegetation and the hydraulic system, and the function of this palace, festivities, entertainment, and exoticism. The construction began in 1746 by Dom Pedro. Dom Pedro was the second son of King John V and brother of King Joseph I. However, King Joseph I only had 4 daughters, so they decided that it was better to marry the oldest daughter, with her uncle than with a foreign prince. So they married in 1760. Then they became queen and king of Portugal in 1777. However, Queluz remained a retreat for the royal family, a retreat for entertainment. And only when the royal residence in Lisbon was destroyed by a fire, Queluz came up as the solution, as it was the palace with more dignity to become the royal residence. And so its function totally shifts from a summer residence to a palace with court, for the court and for the residence, as the residence for the royal family. It was like that up until the Napoleonic invasions in 1807, and then the royal family left to Brazil. So let's analyze the plan of Queluz. Here is the plan of Versailles. So all of these works, we used to say, obey to the same principles. This is what historiography has consecrated. So the garden is subordinated to the house. Its design is made to be seen and understood from the 2nd story windows, that is from the master's apartment. Its basins are located so they reflect its images. Its alleys and their intersections are designed to multiply the perspectives under which it may be seen. The orientation of the garden along a living axis which traverses the garden, allowing at Vaux Versailles the gaze to pass uninterrupted through the 1st floor, permitted members of the court a perspective of the principal axis reaching towards infinity. We can see that, we can observe that in Queluz. So this is one point of similarity between these 2 gardens. So the gardens unfold along this garden of Queluz unfold along 2 main axes, which is this one and this one, set to compass points. the primary access begins at the Royal Palace. However, in this case, it does not continue as far as the eye can see, but towards a monumental cascade, which is here. And this vanishing point is something that we can observe in all European gardens of this kind. However, nobody thinks anymore like this. So Michel Conin contradicts it, as he shows there is more diversity than this role model. He states that in garden art has not paid sustained attention to Baroque art, to Baroque style, and that the categories of formal and natural have isolated garden studies from critical debates in both art or literary history and social or cultural history at large. And I add technical scientific history at large also, as if anything could exist out of its historical content. Therefore, we, so Michel Conin and myself, I think we follow the conceptual framework put forward by Eric de Jong. So he prefers to look at the circulation of ideas, models, knowledge, and skills. Moreover, Michel Conin prefers to talk about Baroque age and considers that Baroque garden culture seems to emerge in its European diversity from the circulation of people, objects, plants, and ideas. And this is more or less what we are going to see in this presentation. This is the first project for Queluz. We can observe here not only the plan as if it was a sunburst, but also a maze. There is one parterre, which will be the hanging gardens. The other one is not yet projected. And here we have a natural stream and a road. However, for the marriage of Princess Mary with Prince Dom Pedro, in 1760, this area was rearranged. There was a tank here. So after that first model, they made a tank there, a huge lake, a rectangular lake. And then this was transformed into a parterre, into another parterre of broderie for the festivities. By the end of the 18th century, as this palace was to be transformed into the royal residence, the palace was enlarged and improved. At least there was a project to enlarge and improve enormously this palace. However, it was not implemented. But this drawing shows not only the parterre of broderie, but also some orange groves here. We can check that this was transformed, so the design of the parterres was transformed into a more geometric pattern. I would like also to highlight the difference between a Portuguese quinta and the translation that we use, which is villa. It's the best that we have, but it's not perfect. So the Portuguese quinta has always a productive area, even in an erudite model, in an erudite garden such as Queluz. And so this is, in this area is the road that I was talking about. But you have here an area of coppice where there are also orchards and orange groves, and even some artificial areas, artificial display of trees. So this component, this dichotomy between beauty and utility, recreation and production is always present in a Portuguese quinta villa. So the garden of Queluz, and Queluz was always understood as la miniature du Palais de Versailles, Versailles portugais, l'imitation de Versailles. So this was the main interpretation up until the middle of the 20th century. Then it shifts completely. And so in the middle of the 20th century, a tourist guide to Queluz claims that the phrase made of Portuguese Versailles that is commonly given to the Palace of Queluz is not acceptable. And then two important historians, Angela de la Force and Simonetta Luz Afonso, will say that, in fact, the influences in Queluz are Italian and German. So we are going to change completely what was thought up until then. When we are talking about the inspiration and the role model for Queluz, we also have to think about the books that could guide their design, their making. What were the books available for the architects and for the king at Queluz? Well, that books were important. Some historians have already said that probably the book by Jacques Boisseau or the book by William Chambers were important for Queluz, as there is a pagoda, as there was a pagoda at the Botanical Garden. However, the research that we have made for the past decade on the circulation of books interesting for the art of gardens in Portugal cannot sustain this hypothesis, because there is no evidence that Jacques Boisseau or William Chambers have ever circulated, their books have ever circulated in Portugal. I've always thought that the book that could be interesting for Queluz was the one that Monica Luengo has just talked about. So, Des Alliés d'Argentville, la théorie et la pratique du jardinage. However, there was no evidence up until 3 years ago that the book was really at the library of Queluz. So far, we just knew that there were some copies of Des Alliés d'Argentville. We even knew some of the owners of those copies, and of course, we knew that that book was already in some of the royal libraries, but not exactly in Queluz. However, it was discovered 3 years ago at the National Library of Rio de Janeiro. So I was there doing research and saw a book with the seal of Dom João. So in fact, it was one more of the documents that were brought with the royal family in 1807. And so now it's much more clear that this was the book that was there for them to use, to see, to have ideas, to take ideas for the design of the parterres. Also a lot of technical aspects, how to make these kind of gardens. And here we have, for example, this design that was for a moment during the restoration of the Garden of Malta. This was at Queluz, and here we see Jean-Baptiste Robillon, so the French sculptor that was working at the Garden of Queluz. And here he is showing the project that we have already seen, the one of the Parterre de Broderie. So he's showing this project to the king. And now here it is, the garden restored as we think it was originally. See, so Parterre de Broderie. And how to make this Parterre de Broderie is also something that is taught at the book by Des Alliés d'Argentville. And so here it is how they are explaining how to make the quadratura, that is usually used in painting, but also in gardens. So how to go from the drawing to the soil, to the terrain, and to transport a design from the project to the place. So all this is explained, and here, as you see, it's a parterre de broderie, quite similar to the original one, and then that was transformed into something like this. So even the second parterre, more geometric, can also, it is possible that it was also taken from here. So up until now, what we have seen about the plan, the designs of the parterre, and even the book that was used as an inspiration, not only for artistic, but also for technical aspects, all that brings us close to the French model of Versailles. Now, can we talk about iconography or iconology when we are interpreting Queluz? Well, iconology, to make an iconological reading of this garden, there should be a message, something that the patron wanted to tell to his visitors, and that does not occur in Queluz. So that is the difference, is because if there was an intention in the gardens of Versailles, so Louis XIV was present as Apollo, and all that was a power show, as Chandra and other historians had already demonstrated. However, if that doesn't occur, there are other topics, iconographic subjects, that resonate the gardens of Versailles. So we have here the Neptune. I'm going to talk to you about other books that were also used for these fountains. So for example, we have Cartari, Immagini degli Dei, one of the most famous mythographers that seems to inspire this one. But Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is probably the most used to depict God's episodes, is used for the group that is at Segovia. Another one, for example, another episode of the gods of gardens, so Vertumno, the god of gardens, and the Pomona, the goddess of gardens, which is also appears, that appear in every European gardens of this kind. As you see, when we look at an engraving of Ovid's Metamorphoses, we always see the old woman talking with the young woman, and this old woman is in fact Vertumno disguised. And when she says, when the Pomona says, okay, oh, I think I will accept to talk with him, then he takes the mask out and says, well, it's me. And it is this moment of transformation that is chosen to be in gardens. And it is like that in Versailles. And this model was disseminated to all Europe through le recueil des statues et des groupes et fontaines de Versailles, so by Thomasin in 1723. If these books will spread the designs and the topics proper for this kind of gardens, who is making them? So there is a workshop at Hyde Park Corner, that area more or less, in England, in London, and that workshop by John Shear makes lead sculptures. He's very famous for making lead sculptures for every garden in Europe, or a lot of them. And he's copying the classical statues, but also groups by Giambologna and Bernini. And he has a small catalog that was that is already known, And that's why we say that there is no program for Queluz, because the King Dom Pedro, he just bought everything that was at the catalog. So he bought all the statues that John Cheer had to sell. So there was no program, not even through a selection, we can say that, because he just bought everything. And so what are we going to have at Queluz? Well, more than 100 statues. For example, this Diana and Mars. The Mars is just like other Mars, or similar to other Mars that John Cheer has made for other gardens, just as Hampton Court. They are placed in the same locations. So there is an air of family that in fact connects all these gardens, and part of it is due to sculpture, to garden sculpture. Now we have here this area of the Garden of Queluz where there were all these groups. They are not, this one, we see this one does not exist anymore, was a copy of this statue by Gian Bologna, the abduction of the Sabines, and this another abduction, but of Proserpine, by Bernini, which was copied by François Girardon. Then it is divulged throughout Europe through Le Recueil by Thomassin, and then it is also made by John Cheer for Queluz. Other groups, so the lead sculptures come from London, but the stone sculptures come from Genoa. So we have all these kind of children that were made in Genoa, but the design, we have here like how they arrived in Queluz, but the design also comes from Versailles. So this kind of children, they are also in the gardens of Versailles, and also in Recueil, the same Recueil. So probably the topics were selected through that album. In Queluz, we are also going to find the famous horses that were made for the Marly Gardens. And here we have our two horses, which separate the hanging gardens from the park. Now, if all these connect us with this large family of European gardens that resonate from the gardens of Versailles, and that bring us together, then we have some other sculptures that are very unique in Queluz gardens. And that, for example, as this one, that is because Jean-Baptiste Robillon was a sculptor, but also a goldsmith. And he was working at the gardens of Queluz, and he designed lakes and fountains for these lakes as if he was designing a silverware. And so it seems that this design was inspired by silverware, by plates such as this. As I already told you, the vegetation and the hydraulic system are unique, are different from the trend of gardens that we have talked insofar. And why? Because we have Mediterranean climate with periods of drought and hot weather, irregular distribution of rainfall, vegetal species with perennial leaves that dominate the garden. So throughout the year, this is going to offer a chromatic and aromatic diversity that does not occur in Central Europe. So if we believe, as I do, of the potentially diffuse aestheticism of landscape, we believe that different landscapes will foster different gardens. And so that turns Queluz into a unique place a sustainable garden, and that seems an eternal spring. Although most of these species of shrubs and trees are totally adapted to our climate, we know that many of them came from Holland, as the gardener-in-chief was Dutch. And so the plants were important from Holland, a lot of trees and also pyramids of boxwood and yew. So as we have seen in so far, the sculptures come from London and Genoa, the plants from Amsterdam, the gardener-in-chief is Dutch, the designer of the garden is French. So we have already an array of influences that are brought together here at Queluz. But we have also some features that are very Portuguese, that are the soul of our gardens, such as orange groves. Even in an erudite model, even as Queluz, an erudite garden that follows, as we have seen, that is inspired by treatises and books. So there is a theoretical basis here. However, we are going to find features that are the soul of Portuguese gardens, such as orange groves that are everywhere here. So even the maize was transformed into an orchard of oranges, all these. So all these are oranges, orchards of oranges. And another that are displayed just as this, as they were since Al-Andalus in this region. And we can also see here another important feature of Portuguese gardens, but that also resonates this Islamic influence, which is the canal. So we do, that is quite often in Portugal, to see that if you can take advantage of the site, we will do that instead of manipulating space at a large scale, as we see in other regions. So because there was here a road, it's true. However, our vanishing point will go towards a monumental cascade. There is not here a huge lake as we can find, for example, in France or in England or in many other places. So we have because there was already a natural stream. As there was a natural stream, we are going to take advantage of that natural stream. So we are going to decorate it with tiles. So, and this became a unique element of gardens of this period and others, that we have a natural stream that is highly decorated, totally covered with tiles. So this is unique. And with floodgates, so with these gates, this natural stream was transformed into a lake. So in the end, to provide the same function as the Great Canal of Queluz. The aspect of our use, our sensibility towards water can be observed here. When we compare the jets of water of the Latona fountain and of the Tétis fountain, they occupy more or less the same position in both gardens. And so it's fair, this comparison. However, we see that the way we use water, the murmur of water that we enjoy so much in our gardens, and also this thin, this elegant jet of water stems from Islamic influence and has nothing to do with the kind of works of water that we find in gardens of Central Europe. In this engraving, we can see all the hydraulic system of the the garden of Queluz. Where are the mines? Where are the sources of water that were channeled, that were conducted to the gardens of Queluz? And it was this study also connected with the restoration works. So the restoration works allowed us to see all the hydraulic system, so underground, although part of it's are open air channels. We could see also the conducts at the Malta Garden. And so in the Aqua project, which is coordinated by me, we study early modern hydraulic systems of gardens, and Queluz was one of its case studies. So we could understand that 4 subsystems were used at Queluz, and we can see here that the Miradouro subsystem is the one that feeds all the lakes, fountains, up until the monumental cascade. One of the great discoveries, well, it was an hypothesis that was confirmed by hydraulic engineers. So in fact, the consumption of water was analyzed and compared in Queluz with contemporary gardens. And, well, surprise of surprises, Queluz consumes less water than contemporary gardens, more or less of the same area. And why is this? It's not a big, smart systems are better than open air channels, running channels. However, the design of contemporary gardens uses a lot loans, and loans in a country with the climate such as Portugal, with Mediterranean climate, requires so much water supply that in fact they are much less sustainable than an historical garden with trees and shrubs such as Queluz, and also where waters are reused. So at the monumental cascade, so you have seen the subsystem of the Miradouro, that all the water comes from there, so it activates all the fountains, all the lakes, it makes all this area, and then it still has pressure to elevate, to be elevated here, more or less like 4 stores, and then to fall from the cascade. The amount of water that is used for this is not that much, but it is very efficient. It produces the effect of falling water, and the system is still working. So just to have an idea how effective it was. So in 1796, there was a party here to commemorate the inauguration, to celebrate the 50 years over the beginning of the construction of Queluz. So this is important, how to make a party to celebrate 50 years of the house. It's amazing. So it also tells us, it highlights how important this villa was for the royal family. And it was full of sculptures by then. Festivities, entertainment, and exoticism are the topics that convey a Rococo experience. For example, we have this painting of the marriage between the Prince Dom João and Princess Carlota Joaquina, and all the ambience, all the exoticism, all this intimacy, in fact, evokes the Rococo ambience. However, how was the daily life at Queluz? We can still check other examples to confirm if we have here the Rococo facet. For example, in this photograph, we can see How is the connection between the palace and the garden made through the staircases, these very scenographic staircases by Robillon, and also that generates this kind of intimate and closed space. And from here we are going to the canal, the highly decorated canal that we have already seen, that was transformed into a lake, and it was possible to ride the gondola here, lead to the music. We have photographs of, not of gondolas, but we know that they were in the Testament, but we have of boats, and there was the house of music. So there was all along the canal, there were a lot of pavilions and areas for recreation, such as this one, which was for the palm game. And we have some of the pavilions still existent, such as this, the Chinese house. And there was a pagoda at the Botanical Garden. There was here another pavilion, and then it was destroyed. So this project was made at a certain moment in time. However, it was not implemented, and they decided to create a scenario for that group of sculpture. The daily life of Queluz was fulfilled with picnics and light meals taken at the garden. So even paintings evoke these picnics, but there are also a lot of documents that tell us everything about these meals. Now, the Botanic Garden is a very important spot also to analyze the exoticism at Queluz. The exoticism and this mix of art and science and influences from Orient and from the Occident, so from the India and from Americas. From India, no, from Asia. So we have here the Botanical Garden. We see that we have 4 greenhouses. There were vegetable gardens here. So there is always this side-by-side, this mix of utility, recreation, and here we even have science. So here are the greenhouses. Now, what is very interesting about this garden was restored just a few years ago. What is interesting about this garden is that this was designed by, projected by the king's physician, and he was totally fascinated by one of the most famous scientists of his time, which was Linnaeus. And so he's going to project in the garden the 24 classes by Linnaeus. So the plants are arranged in a totally different way of another garden, because the arrangement has nothing to do with their horticultural needs. So for each of them, they have to create almost a microclimate, as we can see here. I will leave you with this present for kings. So it was not only Charles II who was enchanted by pineapples. King Dom Pedro was also. And so every day he would go to the Botanical Garden just to check his pineapples. These were for the king's table. And so we have the pagoda, but we also have the pineapples from South America. And it is with this present that I am going to leave you. So to conclude, I would like to say that Queluz has its unique history, its identity, without being apart from the European family of gardens of the Baroque age, as Michel Conin had said. So if the Rococo garden is characterized by its irregularity, intimacy, and eclecticism, we can say that at first sight, we can talk about intimacy and eclecticism related to Queluz. However, intimacy and eclecticism are all in all Portuguese gardens. and transversal to all periods. So it is not something that occurred only in Queluz. It is the matrix, the soul of Portuguese gardens. Therefore, we are left with irregularity. However, Baroque gardens the irregularity of Baroque gardens is usually seen in bandwork and arabesques that are strictly contained within rectangular parterres, and in Rococo gardens that resonate in serpentine paths, exotic plantings, and fantastic folies. It is only in the fantastic folies, although the majority are now lost, that the playful nature of the Rococo garden come to the top in a certain period before Queluz became the royal residence. This is why I argue it is a Baroque garden with some Rococo features, and that it follows the French role model of Versailles in the sense that it was the most disseminated throughout practitioners and books, and the most popular among all courts of Europe. And it is this that offers all European gardens of this type and period an air of family. On the other side, an array of influences coming from different parts of Europe and the world are intermingled in Queluz, and this is what makes it unique. It is the appropriation, the reinvention, and the national character that allow us to say that we have a garden that unites it with all other European gardens of the Baroque age, and at the same time relinquishes it with all other Portuguese gardens. And I am so thankful to Viriato, and especially to Patricia Monteiro, who helped me to record this film. And thank you so much for your attention. And any question, please, any question, any suggestion, any topic for this discussion, please send me an email. Okay, thank you so much.